Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Tech CMO Talks featuring marketing leaders in the software industry. I'm your host, Connie. Today, we'll discuss the rise of communities. At Instruqt, we see firsthand among our customers, which are software companies, that invest in growing their communities. They build education for their community, and they tell us that the starting point is to give back to the community, which I found very fascinating. So today, I have someone who knows a lot about community growth with me today. So I'm super happy to welcome Michael Francisco, our guest today. Michael is the VP of Marketing at Common Room. Common Room is a community led growth platform based in Seattle. Previously, he spent time at GitHub, Amazon, and Microsoft, and was an early member of the marketing and business development teams responsible for strategy and execution for emerging products, including Azure, Alexa, and GitHub Actions, which we are all familiar with today. Michael, welcome to the show.
No, thanks, Connie. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here today. So, I think last time when we first chatted, I mentioned to you, I read a lot like people are saying community is the new moat. And we see a lot of companies today investing in communities. Maybe you can start by telling us, especially I think as marketers, right, why we should pay attention to communities and why it matters to business today.
Yeah, happy to. So long time ago when I started doing marketing at Microsoft years and years ago, community was a thing. We had people who were out there working with the developer community, trying to help them adopt products and make sure that they were leveraging the tools that Microsoft brought to bear for developers. And so it's a thing that's been around a long time because it's how developers gather, it's how they learn, it's how they share information. They get together in these social channels to share best practices, troubleshoot, learn from each other. And over time, that has shifted from a place where it used to be that the work done around community was wholly separate from the go-to-market engines, the marketing teams, the sales teams. It was thought that the community teams, it was really just about, let's go get people to use our tools. And that's kind of the function of that. At the time, a lot of software was purchased through internal procurement organizations. And there was a lot of kind of top-down selling, a lot of steak dinners and that sort of thing to drive kind of these large deals across enterprises. But that has changed. I think as we've seen in the industry, this kind of tendency towards shifting left from a development perspective, moving more and more responsibility onto the developers' plates. We've also seen more autonomy and budget shift that direction in terms of how they choose the tools they use for their daily work, whether it be to solve acute problems, whether it be infrastructure choices or whatever those things are. Developers now and development teams and engineering teams have the opportunity to select the right tools that are right for them. If you look at how that has impacted the way that software is purchased, you see this trend where a lot of decisions are made not based upon marketing materials or not based upon selling engagements. Decisions are made based upon the recommendations of peers and trusted advisors. People have a problem. And I think a good example of this is, say, observability. I need to figure out how to just solve the monitoring problem within my infrastructure. I'm going to probably go to forums where people are discussing these topics, maybe ask some of my peers, look for recommendations from trusted advisors, and then go see if that tool works for me. In most of these cases, folks want to do this discovery and learning on their own without having to engage a seller. I think Gartner recently said that 5% of the total buying journey is actually the part of the journey where sellers can engage and influence. The other 95% of that is happening, outside of the CRM. It might be having marketing touches, but a lot of that is happening within the community. And we believe that community is kind of where decisions are made and where growth for organizations happen. If we look at kind of the impact of that buying journey and people wanting to self-select and then only engage with sellers when it's appropriate or when it's beneficial for the buyer to do that, it creates a bit of a problem or probably an opportunity, I would say, for marketers and sellers to figure out what is the right way to engage that group. And so what we're seeing, especially in a lot of our customers, is a continued focused intent in engaging that community, helping them and adding value in hopes that it continues to grow the adoption and ultimately acquisition of their software.
Mm-hmm. So it's changes in the buying behavior.
Yep.
At the same time, also the information that is at your fingertips, basically,
Yeah.
that you don't need to rely on the vendor marketing materials, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how you choose where you go to dinner, right? This isn't something that's
Mm-hmm.
unique for developers. If I think about where I'm going to dinner, I might go check out a menu on a website, but more likely what I'm going to do is get on Yelp or OpenTable and look at what other people are saying.
Yeah.
People who are not personally invested in me spending money at that restaurant. Right. They're just kind of giving their own opinions and sharing information. And that's where I'm going to get the most honest feedback about what's happening at that particular location. And the same is true in enterprise software purchases, right? Like my marketing materials could say that I have the best solution ever. That's a wholly biased opinion based on the fact that I am intrinsically motivated to get you to buy what I have. Talking to your peers, it's a different scenario, right? Like I could see a menu that says the best Italian food in town. I'm probably going to go ask one of my friends who is an expert in these sorts of things, maybe had a mother who cooked great Italian food, to give me an opinion on this, right? Because there's no bias there. And I think that pattern is kind of becoming more pervasive across the board. And I think it's important to recognize the influence that communities have on the business.
Yeah. So would you say like community-led growth, right? Alongside, we also heard about product-led growth, and then previously we have sales-led, marketing-led. I mean, is it a new go-to-market motion that you see?
Yeah, I think it's a new way to think about your end-to-end funnel for software acquisition. I wouldn't say that community-led growth replaces either of those things. I'd actually say that it's complementary, just as a well-implemented PLG model is complementary to a traditional sales model. You have more of this hybrid motion. It forces some changes in the way that each of those functions behaves. So in the PLG model, for example, a lot of that selling motion is focused now on retention and expansion within those accounts. And sometimes selling happens when somebody moves through a PLG model and the volume that they need to purchase exceeds whatever they can do through self-service. Then the seller engages in more of a consultative approach to help them navigate the buying process, make sure that they are getting the right discounting, make sure they're getting the right solution to solve their needs, versus having that seller focusing on kind of going out, prospecting, bringing that lead in, warming it up, and bringing it through. That still happens, and there's always a need for enterprise sales. However, the emergence of PLG has kind of changed that. And now with community, thinking about how community kind of sits alongside both of those things, community becomes a very complementary model to both of those, kind of helping both the marketing teams who are seeing kind of declining efficiency in traditional marketing tactics. I think inbound this year, HubSpot said that outbound email marketing is decreased by 30% in efficiency. And so as you're thinking about a marketer and really having to break through the digital fatigue that prospects are experiencing, you need to find new ways to reach them. And often the ways to reach them are through their trusted peers and the communities in which they're engaging. So I would say community-led growth is both a complement to what's happening today, and kind of whether it be a traditional sales model, a hybrid model, or a PLG model. It's a complement at the front end of that experience, but it also, and when I say complement, it's a new set of signals, right? Like as you think about PLG providing product signals to your sellers to understand when somebody has a high intent to buy, or they've reached a certain threshold where you're fairly confident that they're ready to convert. Community provides a different set of signals that happen before they even engage with the product. That's very valuable to marketers and sellers as they move the process. But community doesn't just affect the initial purchase. Community actually affects the entire life cycle of that customer. If you think about a company like Figma as example, Figma, recently was acquired, a great kind of testament to the power of kind of community and taking a product, really maturing it and driving it to a place where it was of high value to another organization. Not only is community valuable for them in terms of sharing, building awareness and kind of affinity within the community, but it's also important from an awareness and retention perspective, because those people don't stop visiting the community when they buy the software. They continue to engage, right? And as you know, education is really, really important for both of these things. And so if I have a strong community that has a high level of activation amongst its members, there's a high likelihood that my users are engaging in that community. They're learning from each other. They're sharing best practices, which ultimately leads to broader usage of the product, helps them think about how do I use this product with other organizations. So in the case of Figma, I might have been a designer, but now I'm working with my product team, and now my product team is working inside of Figma. Now we're engaging with our product marketing team, and they're also working inside of Figma. So you can see how that expands very, very broadly. And so community is not just about growth at the front end. It's about growth throughout the entire life cycle, ensuring that you are kind of helping nurture and build those customers to places where they're expanding their skills, expanding their usage, and being more and more likely to not only renew, but also expand as they get to those renewal points.
Yeah, so it really makes a lot of sense, right? To grow and nurture your communities.
Yeah.
Earlier, you gave an example about the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
So my next question actually is like, are there particular products that are more suited to focus on, community-led growth?
So I think that you mean in terms of industries, I think today we're seeing a lot of adoption from kind of I would say the born in the cloud, to use a trendy term, the born in cloud kind of hyper growth SaaS developer tools companies are a very natural fit for this. But I would also say that as we've progressed through our own journey, we're seeing much more interest from large enterprises who are recognizing that they need to figure out a way to engage their community as well. And I think that this is relevant not just for these two kind of sets of folks, these hyper growth SaaS developer tools, as well as these large software enterprise companies. But I also think that over time, we're going to see this expand into other industries as well. As communities of practice and communities of product continue to grow, I think that we're going to see organizations move away from kind of standard social listening strategies and tactics, and thinking more about how do I leverage kind of what I'm learning from the community to better support them, better activate them, and as a result of that positive adding of value to the community, see added growth within their own organization. So I think today it's very much focused on software, and I think that over time we're going to see that expand quite a bit.
Really exciting. From what you see, who is leading community growth at like these software companies?
So it's interesting. If we look historically, you see these kind of DevRel community building teams live all over the organization. We recently did a DevRel compensation survey, and we found that there was a pretty even mix, about right around 32% of teams sitting inside of marketing versus sitting inside of their own organization. And over time, what we're seeing is a trend, and of course they said in other places as well. Engineering, when I was at GitHub, they sat inside the product organization, and it really depends on the goals from within the company for what they want to do with their kind of developer relations function. At GitHub is very much about product feedback, making sure that we're supporting our users, learning from them, but also making sure they're having great experiences in the product. In other organizations, it makes sense for them to live inside of marketing, where it's really about how do we invest in kind of our user satisfaction, and which is of course a leading indicator for retention over time. You'll see those things live inside of marketing. So it's a pretty I would say it's pretty diverse setup, but what we're seeing is a lot of movement with community teams living inside of the marketing organization.
Great. It's really exciting, right? To go into this whole communities and trying to really grow through building relationship with that.
Yeah.
But what do you need to tap into the communities?
Well, I think the place you start is kind of with establishing your ethos, like really understanding what it is to engage with the community. And I think historically, one of the reasons why you didn't see these teams sitting inside of like marketing and kind of go-to-market teams is because there was a separation there between kind of church and state, where these teams were very much focused on revenue, and these community and DevRel teams were focused on something different, right? They were focused on satisfaction and engagement, those sorts of things. When I think about engaging with the community, that when I say the ethos, it's really about understanding that your community is not a marketing channel, right? You aren't going out there to acquire a list of thousands of users who are engaging with each other that you can then send your marketing to. It's really about adding value to the community. And first you have to add value before you can kind of build value in your own organization. So I think that's where it starts. From there, then, I think there's a number of platforms and tools that make sense for people to engage their community. So there are, forums that you can, implement that are a combination of chat and knowledge bases. You can implement a Discord server, Choros, Slack to engage your community. There's a lot of ways that you can engage from like a technology perspective. But I think that there's a difference between community in the context of what you own, meaning I have a Slack channel that I've built community around and people are engaging directly with me. That's one place that community lives. But it's a kind of short-sighted and narrow view of what community actually is. And as we think about community, it's the entire ecosystem of people who are talking about your product, either positively or negatively. And it's not just happening in one place. There's this distributed network effect that we see where people are engaging perhaps in your Slack channel, but they're probably also engaging in GitHub, or maybe in Stack Overflow, or maybe they're engaging in a private channel specifically around the topic or the solution area that your product fits inside of. And so I think there's a number of tools that you can use to own and engage, but it's also important to have the ability to see kind of across the ecosystem and be able to aggregate all of that data to get a real view of what's happening inside your community. Because your community is larger than your community.yourcompany.io or .com. It's really everything that's happening out there, and getting visibility into that is important.
Totally. What common challenges do you see with companies trying to go the community-led growth way?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges I see is, I would say, a lack of full commitment to supporting the community. I think folks who are community professionals know that it's a lot of work to go out and engage in a meaningful way. And the most important thing in engaging your community is both adding value, but doing that consistently. In order to build trust and to build thought leadership and those sorts of things, and trust being the most important thing, you have to be consistent and you have to be constantly engaging. You can't just show up when it's convenient for you to show up. If I have a community and I'm just showing up every time I launch a product to tell you about this new cool thing I launched, the authenticity of that relationship declines significantly. And so one of the challenges that we see is people trying to engage in community, trying to go out and influence them, but not really investing in the right way to help themselves with the scale, to effectively deal with the scale of the community that they need to influence, which then actually works against them because of the lack of authenticity, and people see right through that.
And what about maybe also demonstrating the ROI from these efforts?
Yeah, that's another thing. And I think that goes right back to the question about investment, right? So going back to my example of organization sitting inside a community organization sitting inside of marketing, as the marketing leader in that organization, I care about a lot of KPIs, right? I care about things like MQLs, and I care about things like bounce rate, but ultimately that's not how I'm evaluated. Those are simply things that accrue to the thing that I am evaluated on, which is the amount of revenue that our company drives at the end of the year, at the end of every quarter, right? And my role in that as a marketing person is to make sure that I'm building sufficient pipeline for us to hit our revenue targets, and also making sure that I'm putting the right things in place to make sure that we're accelerating deal velocity and things like that to ultimately lead to the number. If we look at community metrics and kind of how we've traditionally evaluated community, and kind of the health of community engagement, we might look at things like number of active members. We might look at response rate, activity, growth over time, things like that, in order to kind of understand the health of the community. But the translation of that to the metrics that I care about as a marketing leader or a sales leader or a CRO there's a gap in the communication there, both in terms of kind of what the desired outcomes are, but how those things work together. And so often when we are talking about investments in community, there is a leap of faith that somebody needs to take in order to invest if they don't understand how that connects to the business. So being able to connect community outcomes and very focused outcomes that are really focused on the needs of that community and the health of that community, being able to understand how that translates to business metrics is really important for getting the right level of investment and commitment from executive teams to make that investment.
So can you tell us about Common Room and how you help companies in terms of their community-led growth?
Yeah, for sure. So Common Room we were founded a few years ago by a woman named Linda Leanne, who at the time, prior to founding Common Room, had a chance to work in venture capital, and before that worked with developer relation teams inside of Amazon. And in both roles, she saw this need to help people better engage their community. There was this kind of growing sense that it was more important than maybe we had thought it was, and kind of the growth of business based on all these trends we've talked about. But there was not really tools that kind of helped simplify the process, either for the community builder or the DevRel individual whose job is very wide ranging. They speak at events, they contribute to open source code, they create documentation, they have to engage with the community. And as that community expands, the amount of engagement that requires is significant in order to make people feel welcome and appreciated within the community. They're building champions programs, ambassador programs, all sorts of things that they're asked to do, but there was no tools that really simplified that process for them. So that's where we started, was building a platform that allowed community professionals to be able to both aggregate all of this data from all of these different sources, both owned and otherwise, and then bring them together in a way that was meaningful and insightful for those folks, so they understood how to take action on the things they were learning. So we start with the principle of integrate everywhere, trying to integrate with all the platforms where people are engaging. We pull that information in, and then we apply AI and ML to do profile unification and really provide a 360 view of your users, be able to understand how they're participating, what their sentiment is. We do automated AI-driven sentiment analysis using NLP and some other technologies to really understand kind of their level of satisfaction with the product. We can pull in kind of their activity, what they've been saying. We can identify specific activity that's positive sentiment and negative sentiment. So if there's a problem, we can either engage from a DevRel or a community standpoint, or we can maybe pass that off to our customer success team or our product team if we've identified a bug that has emerged in the community. So it started with tools that really help simplify that kind of understanding, and then has grown to being able to, segment people for different programs, being able to do auto tagging within, so you can identify who's the first one from an organization that showed up in your community, who's an influencer in your community, and then being able to see the organizations that are gathering inside of your community. So you can start to see clusters of folks from specific organizations who might provide signals that, hey, these are people that within an organization are evaluating my technology. We've also added workflows in there to help simplify engagement through automated engagement solutions, surveys, as well as welcome messages, branched conversations, all those sorts of things to really kind of make it easier to understand, to take action, and then to engage your community on an ongoing basis. The next phase of our evolution was recognizing that there is a connection between community and the go-to-market business. And so recently we've announced a integration with HubSpot, where our intent is to be able to connect CRM data with your community data and do that in a two-way fashion, to where as a community person, I can understand the context that's happening in on the enterprise sales side. I can see what tier of the product they're in, things like that, and how they're being engaged, that sort of thing that helps me have better context in my job. On the other side, it helps marketers understand kind of what's happening in my community, might be able to help with my lead scoring, might be able to help with my ABM campaigns, to think about what are the signals that come from the community to strengthen my marketing efforts and help overcome these challenges we talked about earlier. For sellers, it provides context for their sales engagements. Knowledge is power for a seller, especially in a world where you need to be consultative. And so there's a lot of data that can be passed to a seller to help make their job easier, but also to the benefit of the buyer, because now they are having a more meaningful conversation with the salesperson, not having to start from ground zero, not having to sit through a first call sales pitch if that's not necessary for them, like really providing that context to kind of make that relationship more seamless. The other kind of outcome of that is the reporting bit. So where we can start seeing now, what is community's real impact on the business? We have seen with one of our customers that they had about $11 million in ARR that actually started in their community. So this was ARR that started as a community engagement. People were talking and they ended up buying, and that happened outside of the CRM. So there's a number of examples we have of customers who have been able to see that, hey, not only is pipeline being driven out of the community, but actual revenue is being driven out of the community. And you can start connecting specific actions with in specific actions that the company takes with community impact that ultimately leads to benefit for the organization. So Asana, as an example, was working to engage their customers and really understand what engagements were working. And they did some work to analyze what was happening relative to product and feature adoption within their champions group. And what they found was that live events, whether online or in person, even within the champions group, which is should be defined as a power users and kind of big fans of your product within an organization, even within that group, those that attended some sort of live event had a statistically significant increase in the number of features that they were using and the growth of their utilization of the product. So Common Room really is a tool that allows you to get intelligence on your community, take action on it, and then really provide the context and insights necessary to help grow your business and support the community, because that's all where it starts. And when we call ourselves a community-led growth platform, it's a combination of doing a great job of supporting your community and adding value and connecting that in a meaningful and insightful way with your go-to-market engines to really kind of have that end-to-end view of community supported across the life cycle, so that community can help support your customers.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think for go-to-market teams, having visibility is so important so that you're not flying blind and you're investing in the right activities.
Yeah, I really think that's important. And again, the community is super valuable for any number of reasons. I've mentioned a lot about how they help each other, but they can also help inform you. And I kind of have this belief that if somebody feels like it's important, if a stranger feels like it's important to say something to you, you should probably listen, right? And that's what's happening in the community. People aren't saying things because they're trolls, that fine, whatever. But there are also a lot of people who take the time to give you feedback because it's important to them that you hear them. And so you can get a lot of those signals to influence your product roadmap. For user-led product roadmap companies, really understanding what's happening can help inform that. They can also help you catch bugs and other things ahead of, faster than you would on your own, to really make sure you have a great customer experience. So there's a really good model here around how supporting a group of people that are affiliated with you in some way can add value. And it's kind of the rule of life, right? Do good things and good things happen to you. And I think that applies here as well.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your insights on community and community-led growth. And thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been fun. I appreciated the time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.